On today's Mega News, oh hey, Battle Network Legacy Collection was in the Nintendo Direct after all. The awful Mega Man X iOS port is now an awful Android port too. It only took 12 years. Meanwhile, more details on the ill-fated Mega Man universe has emerged. All that and more coming up on today's Mega News Roundup. Let's rock! Welcome to your Mega News Roundup for the beginning of February 2023. Coming to you from the ShadowRockZX YouTube channel and the MMNetwork.com. As I'm recording this, we just came right off the heels of a new Nintendo Direct. And overall, it was a pretty decent one. There was definitely a lot of interesting things in there. This isn't necessarily Mega Man related, but they did announce that Game Boy and Game Boy Advance is available as of today on the Nintendo Switch Online service. And while no Mega Man games have been announced for the service at this time for those platforms, do remember that Mega Man The Wily Wars of all games showed up on the Genesis Online service last year. So there's really no reason why we may potentially see the Mega Man Game Boy games, Mega Man and Bass on GBA. I don't know why you would play that one, but sure. Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge, the Mega Man Extreme games, or really any of the games that weren't already in Legacy collections. It would be funny though if they had put all the Battle Network games on the Nintendo Switch Online service and they're like, what Legacy collection? You got online play right here. The online is awful, but here it is. But yeah, let's just say that we are glad that the Legacy Collection does exist and they didn't go that route. But this is a Mega Man channel, so we gotta keep it focused on that. What did Mega Man fans get out of this Direct? Well, as expected, not much. But we did get about 10 seconds of new footage from the upcoming Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. So that's something at least. Let's take up our search soul and take a deeper dive into what we got here. First up is a snippet of the Jack-in animation in Battle Network 5 Team Proto Man, taking place in Lan's bedroom. And here we can get a look at the awful English font being used that is still present. But otherwise, as far as we can tell, everything here is unchanged from the GBA version. Even the Otenko poster above Lan's bed is still there. So in case you still had worries that they cut out the Boktai content out of this collection, here is yet another reason why you shouldn't really be worrying too much. Next is a showcase of the chip trading sequence, showing off the new Woodman and Fireman Navi chip art, which we did cover in the previous Mega News video. By the way, here's a fun fact. In Operate Shooting Star, the DS port of Battle Network 1, Woodman was actually buffed from 60 damage to 70, and Fireman was buffed from 100 to 110 damage. Seeing as here in this footage, the Navi chips still have their vanilla damage values, here is just further evidence that we are dealing with the original Battle Network 1 on Game Boy Advance. And we may never see any changes from Operate Shooting Star, unfortunately. That being said, Battle Network 2 does have one significant change that was noted by Iguchi back at Tokyo Game Show. And to showcase that, this Nintendo Direct actually includes footage of this change in action. Of course, what I'm referring to is the infamous Tree Bomb Prism combo that existed in the Japanese version of Battle Network 2. In case you already forgot how this works, when you throw a Tree Bomb in the same spot as a Prism chip, the Prism in Battle Network 2 does not cause iframes, so it results in a glitch that can instantly delete any enemy in the game. This glitch was somewhat addressed in the US version of Battle Network 2, however some things like sonic booms can still set it off, just not to the extent that Tree Bomb did. However, since Legacy Collection is using the Japanese versions of all the games as a base, that means the Tree Bomb Prism glitch is here in Legacy Collection, at least in single player, as Iguchi said at Tokyo Game Show that in single player they are leaving it completely alone to preserve the player's memories, but in online PvP, where it really matters, they are going to be fixing the glitch to where it actually does cause iframes, similar to how Prism works in Battle Network 3. And we can see that in action right here in the Nintendo Direct, so nice of them to go out of their way to show this to us instead of just taking their word for it. In the last Mr. Famous news back in December, Iguchi said that there was going to be more online adjustments such as this that he has yet to talk about, and part of me hoped that we might hear some more of those during this Nintendo Direct, or at least as a separate video after the Direct. So unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case today. But hopefully we get to hear more about that soon, as well as other things like confirming the Boktai scenarios. Even though they're all but confirmed because of the old Tenko poster and the Gun to Soul chip in the Chinese trailer, it would still be nice to see some footage of them being played out. As well as some other things that people are wondering about, like base cross in BN5 and mod card support. We are just a little over 2 months until the Legacy Collection is in our hands, so time is running out if they want to confirm all this stuff by their own hands. Speaking of confirmations, we can now confirm the ESRB rating for the Legacy Collection, which is everyone plus 10 for both volumes. And if you are at all familiar with the series, you may already be aware of why it's E plus 10 and not just E like the original games were. Well, first of all, E plus 10 didn't really exist back then, but second of all, let's just read the description. So in reference to Volume 1, which contains Battle Network 1 through 3, this is what the ESRB had to say. This is a compilation of action role-playing games in which players help a man stop evil groups from committing cyber crimes. Nice, Lan is already an adult. From a 3/4 overhead perspective, players interact with characters and use a humanoid AI to battle computer viruses and robotic creatures. Players use blasters, energy swords, and mini-bombs to defeat enemies in 2D grid-based battle arenas. Battles are frenetic at times, accompanied by blaster fire and mild explosions. But here's where we get into the spicy stuff. The game contains some suggestive material in the dialogue. An example, "Stop peeking, you pervert." Her measurements are 33, 22, 33. You missed out on seeing her naked. So this piece of dialogue right here takes place in Battle Network 2 after the airman scenario in Battle Network 2, when Yai says to Lan, "Ha, you missed out on seeing me naked." And yes, this stuff actually does happen in the games. Battle Network 2 does not play around. The "stop peeking, you pervert" is Meilu talking to Lan when you walk into her room at some point in the game and she's just shocked that you're in her room while she's changing. You know, classic Japanese game stuff. Continuing on, some sequences depict animal droppings on the ground with accompanying dialogue. An example, "The smell here is too much. Phew, why did he have to go here?" And this is a reference to the Beastman scenario in Battle Network 3, where there's an elephant that just poops everywhere. And yes, it's as hilarious as it sounds. But in case you didn't think that's bad enough, the ESRB goes on to say that players can encounter drunken characters. An example, "hook" in their speech. One mission objective requires the player character to obtain whiskey. You know what that means, folks. The whiskey rapping man on the airplane in Battle Network 2 is still here and intact in the Legacy Collection. Let's go. Are you ready to rumble? Hells yeah! The dialogue in Battle Network 2 is so good, and I'm very glad that they left it intact. At least based on the ESRB website here. But one more thing for Volume 2. Gallery artwork depicts a character with a cigarette in his mouth. And of course, the words "damn" and "hell" appear in Battle Network 2. We know this. Okay, the only thing that's weird, if we back up a little bit, is what the heck are they talking about when they say a character with a cigarette in his mouth? Who, in Battle Networks 1 through 3, actually smokes? Because I know Top Man and Dive Man have pipes, but they're in the Volume 2 collection, not in Volume 1. So unless the gallery has content from all 6 games in each volume, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Actually, we do have one guess as to who they're talking about, and it could be Mrs. Millions, Snake Man's operator in BN2, who has some suggestive dialogue of her own. Not only that, but in her sprite work, she is definitely holding a cigarette. So maybe there's some gallery image of her holding a cigarette. But wait a minute, in the ESRB description, they use his and not her. Interesting. And now we have Volume 2. Again, it's also E+10 for fantasy violence, use of alcohol, and tobacco. Meanwhile, Volume 1 is E+10 because it has crude humor, fantasy violence, mild language, suggestive themes, use of alcohol, and tobacco. Man, Volume 1 is packed. Well anyway, getting back to Volume 2, here's what the ESRB had to say about it. This is a collection of action role-playing games in which players assume the role of Lan Hikari, a boy using a robot to battle enemies in a cyber world. Excuse me, a robot? Wrong series, bro. Anyway, battles are presented with a sideways perspective, with characters taking turns selecting and executing attack moves. Battles depict small explosions, targeted attacks, dwindling health bars and hit points, and laser fire. Some enemies shoot cartoony cannons, harpoons, or missiles at player's character. In one sequence, the character drinks rice wine and acts drunk. An example, hiccuping. As characters remark, an example, I wonder who had won if she wasn't drunk. And this is in reference to Bound Number 4 during the Windman scenario, where Windman's operator actually does accidentally drink some rice wine and she gets drunk. And then after the fight, Lan is wondering who would have won if she wasn't drunk. Now here's a fun fact about this dialogue. In the original Bound Number 4, you don't actually see this quote from Lan until you have already acquired Wind Soul and done the scenario again in a New Game Plus run. Alternatively, you could always import Windman from Red Sun to Blue Moon and play a scenario that way to experience the quote. And since free tournament mode is here in Legacy Collection, you can do that. Anyways, the ESRB finishes their quote by saying a handful of gallery images depicting a robot smoking a pipe. Which, like I already said, they're probably talking about Top Man or Dive Man, or both. All in all, with the content on display in the Bound Network series, yeah, an E+10 is fair. And I'll remind you all, yes, I am not joking, all this stuff actually does happen in the games. Isn't Bound Network just the greatest? And again, it's really cool to see that some of the dark humor of the series has not been removed in the slightest, at least based on these ratings. That's all we got for Battle Network today. So let's go ahead and jack out so we can teleport on into the world of Mega Man X. Oh, no, I'm not talking about Dive this time. I'm talking about an X1 port on mobile. Oh no. So basically, 12 years ago, Capcom launched a Mega Man X port on iOS. In a way, it's kind of like an HD remaster of the original Super Nintendo game. So the graphics are all redrawn, and they look nice and clean. There is only one problem. The port itself is awful. First of all, you're asking people to play a Mega Man X game with touch controls. Okay, I know Dive asks you to do that too if you don't use a controller. The difference is, Dive actually has somewhat playable touch controls considering. This game does not, because this is when Capcom was still figuring out how to optimize touch controls for a 2D action platformer nonetheless. But you know, that's not the worst part. Actually, the worst part is my frames. Where'd they go? Yes, much like a lot of the Mega Man ports from this era, the frame rate is essentially cut in half, and that makes the game significantly less fun to play. Adding on to the list of issues, when you are comparing this port over to the original Super Nintendo version, you can tell right away that the mobile port definitely suffers from screen crunching. That makes it way harder to see enemies coming right at you. We've seen how bad screen crunching can be on the Game Boy Advance games like the Zero series and Mega Man and Bass on there, so you can tell how well this is going to go in X1. There's some other weird things about it as well, but then we have to talk about DLC. Have you ever seen that meme that's been floating around forever with Zero telling X, "Remember, you are not at full power yet"? but you can be for $3.99 US. Yeah, this is the game that comes from. So you have the DLC that just gives you all the upgrades, armor, and special weapons straight from the intro stage. And the game also had DLC that changes the background music to the soundtrack from the remake Maverick Hunter X. That at least is kinda neat. But at that point, just play the MSU1 hack for the Super Nintendo version. So you can have Maverick Hunter X music in X1 that way. Anyways, there's my review of the port, so why am I talking about it again? Alright, so after 12 long years, this game was originally stuck on iOS, but now it has made its way to Android as of a couple days ago. Wait, what? Where did this come from? And why? I don't know, but the official Mega Man channels are talking about it, like, hey, here it is. It's here on Android. Play X1 on mobile. Even though Dive exists now, but there you go, I guess. To be frank, I have no idea why this happened and why now of all times, but it's funny, that's for sure. One other thing to note about this release is it's actually $5 more expensive over the iOS version, which is only $5, but the Android port is $10, at least in the US. And it seems the reasoning behind that is that the Android port actually comes with the Maverick Hunter X music DLC bundled into itself right out of the gate. And that's why it's more expensive, because you're paying for the DLC too in secret. Oh, Capcom, you sneaky dogs. So yeah, even though I definitely do not recommend these ports at all, they are at least still around and kicking, even on the Android store nowadays. So if you are ever feeling morbidly curious, there you go, I guess. In the meantime, we're gonna head on over to our good friends at Rockman Corner, where Protodude has recently posted a new article on the ill-fated Mega Man universe. Just to recap, basically Mega Man universe was going to be like Mega Man Maker is, except it would have been an official Mega Man Maker that's not powered up. It had a weird art style, and you could not only mix and match parts from Japanese Mega Man, American Mega Man, and bad box art Mega Man, but you could mix and match parts from different Capcom characters too, such as Ryu from Street Fighter or Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins. Now, Mega Man Universe was intended to be set up like a live service game. The core content was going to consist of content from Mega Man 2, which features the 8 original Mega Man 2 Robot Masters and their respective stages, which you could then use the bosses and the parts from each stage in the stage creator to make your own stuff. From there, periodically, they would release additional DLC that you would buy and download, which gives you access to more games, more characters, and more parts. Through his sources, Protodude came up with an actual list of some of the DLC that would have been featured. We already knew about Ryu and Arthur, but through this list we found out that Captain Commando was set to be one of the characters you can download as well, as part of a booster pack. In addition, you could download core packs, which consist of Mega Man 1, 3, and 4. And similar to the Mega Man 2 content already in the game, that would just give you access to all 8 stages and bosses from those games. And then you could use their parts for the stage creator, so you just have more options to play around with. I will say, when I first saw this list, it reminded me a lot of how the updates for Mega Man Maker, the fan game, works, where each update is usually themed around a certain game, like Mega Man 11 or Mega Man and Base or something like that. Except, you know, Mega Man Maker is a free fan game, and this, for Universe, would have been paid content. In other words, isn't the fan community just the best? Moving on towards the end of Protodude's article, while this didn't get very far at all before the game got cancelled, Protodude's sources do claim that Inafune was pretty keen on approaching other game studios about using their characters for booster packs. One specific example they threw out was the Master Chief from Halo, which obviously it would have just been a 360 exclusive back then, but yeah, that would have been something alright. Kind of like creating a Smash Brothers but within Mega Man. The first collaboration pack was supposed to be the Gachapin mascot character in collaboration with Fuji TV, but this collaboration pack never formally entered production, since obviously they weren't even able to get the core game as well as all the other DLC out first. And that pretty much sums up the latest information from Mega Man Universe. Even though we had Mega Man powered up on the PSP to scratch that stage creator itch, at least before that shut down too recently, it is a shame that Mega Man Universe never came to fruition. It was basically doing the Mario Maker stuff before Mario Maker made it cool. And that concept alone is very fascinating. And although it's not the same at all, at least we do have fan projects today like Mega Man Maker that carries on the legacy of what Universe would have been. That all said, that's gonna do it for today's Mega News Roundup. With any luck, perhaps we'll have something to cry about next week when it comes to Dive, and we'll see what else comes up. Until then, thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned to ShadowRockZX and the MMNetwork.com for all sorts of Mega Man stuff, including videos like this one. I'd also like to give a shout out to all of our ShadowRockZX channel members, including our SA class supporters Criminal Imagination, Manguy and Spazer, GA class supporters Adrian Cauldron and Austin Buford, and our Ultimate class supporters LML123 and Rico Syndrome. Thank you all so much once again for your support of this channel. We couldn't do it without you. Until the next video, rock on and have a great time zone.